Hey there everybody, Mazrock here, and today I want to talk about how Augmentation Evoker can affect tanks, and this is primarily going to be for Mythic Plus, and I thought this would be a fun video to make and kind of look over some of the stats and where some of the gains are for tanks. Before we do get into it though, please do like, comment, and subscribe. It goes such a long way towards helping out the channel. There is a Patreon link down below if you wish to support me directly. There is exclusive access, early access, coaching stuff, bunch of good stuff there. And I am in fact starting a rotation series for Patreons alone. That's going to be Patreon exclusive as well. So I'm going to be making and updating rotation tip videos for each tank. So if that's something you're interested in, Patreon link down below. There is a Discord link, a Twitch link, and a merch link, all there as well. All right, so Augmentation Evoker is now in the game. Whether you like it, love it, leave it, whatever, it's here and probably here to stay. So what I did is I asked a new Augmentation Evoker friend of mine and viewer of the channel if he could come and buff each one of my tanks with Ebon Might and Blistering Scales alone. That's it. We went off to secluded areas, Algathar Academy for the cross-faction groups, and it's a nice little spot in Valdrakken where there was literally nobody but us, so that way I wouldn't be affected by any other Augmentation Evokers, and just see what's going on there. Because there are two things that you're going to primarily get most of the time as a tank, which is Blistering Scales, which is the tank buff. They do sometimes swap that around, because it does have a nice large absorb, but it does give the person that has those Blistering Scales buffs 30% of their armor. So there's something to be, there's some stuff to look at there. And as well, Ebon Might, which gives you a nice big chunk of their primary stat as well. So I wanted to see how this kind of affected tanks, because now that it's been almost a week and a half at least, I've played with Augment Evokers on every single one of my tanks, so I've got a good feel for things, and we're going to be going over each tank in kind of like a minute and a half, 2 minutes. I don't want this video to go on forever just talking about numbers, but I do want to talk about every tank. So that's what we did, so that's what we're looking at. Now, if we're talking about prescience as well, that it can occur in a Mythic Plus run that you may get this buff from time to time, but primarily that's going to be given to damage dealers. So with that, let's start off with the warrior. So my warrior started off with, by the way, all of my tanks were item level 442, 444, so I felt this was kind of a decent thing. And also Augmentation Evoker. Your mileage may vary considering how much mastery they have, how much intellect they have, their eye level, all of that. So this is just something. Don't expect every Augment Evoker to give you the exact same amount of armor or whatever. So because of that, we're going to kind of round out some of these numbers instead of being very specific. So for example, my warrior started off with an armor rating or whatever of 23,800. It's technically 23,817, but again, because mileage may vary, we're just gonna go with rounded numbers, right? Once given the Blistering Scales buff, that went up to 27,416. Then with Ebon Might added on to it, that actually did go up again to 29,014. So basically, and this is a warrior was the only one where this really happened, where the Ebon Might buff actually increased their armor. And that's obviously due to talents in the class itself. So again, going from 23,800 to 27,400 to 29,000, which is a really nice big buff for warrior, which is just an absolute physical monster beast, right? And on top of that, the parry rating went up by 1%. So, interesting little things there. Parry does, of course, work nice with Best Served Cold, and the amount of stats that we get currently in Mythic Plus, well, in Season 2, is we're actually capable of getting more crit now than we were in the past, which serves really, really well for Prot Warrior. I think I've had more crit now than I've ever had as a Prot Warrior in ever. Now, there is some synergies there with kind of defensiveness, but that, again, adds to the physical aspect of what Prot Warrior is already good at. So you do gain a nice big chunk of, again, you know, as a Prot Warrior, whenever there's an Augment Invoker, I will tell you I feel immortal during a lot of packs. Freehold is a joke, because there's, like, nothing there that can kill me. It's kind of funny. But moving on to Blood DK. So my Blood DK started off with an armor rating of 8,300. And then with Blistering Scales, that went up to 11,200. And gained nothing from Ebon Might. And my parry rating went from 27.75% to 29.24%. So again, with the plate tanks, you gain parry with main stat buff. So when Ebon Might was applied, you gain some extra parry rating. I got a little bit less on Prot Warrior, and I felt like I got a little extra 0.5% on Blood DK. Now the nice thing with Blood DK and that parry rating is it works really, really well. Now I have quite a bit of crit on my Blood DK. So with that, I try and make sure that I'm it's part of my active mitigation. So that's really, really nice, and a nice, decent armor value gain, kind of all around. And of course, the strength is just all around good. Now, of course, each one of these you get primary stat, but we're kind of looking into the more secondary things, right? Continuing on with the plates here. So with Paladin, Paladin started off with a base armor of 15,400, and Shield of the Righteous added 14,100 armor for a total of 29,500. Now, Blistering Scales affects your base armor, of course. Ebon Might affects Shield of the Righteous. So armor, my base armor gain went up to 18,500, and Shield of the Righteous went up to 17,000 per cast. So right off the bat, we come to a total there of 35,800, gaining almost 6,000 armor from both buffs combined. But you really need both. You need Ebon Might and Blistering Scales both to get the full value of that, which I found very interesting. And my parry rating actually did go up a little bit more significantly than some of the other tanks, from a 20% to a 22.27% parry rating. And that's really what changed there. But that's a 2% parry rating increase, which does synergize nicely with Grand Crusader to give you more Avengers Shield procs, which I found actually to be pretty interesting, and a nice decent bit of armor gain along the way. So you can pretty easily get 36,000. Again, mileage may vary depending on, trinkets, primary stat, and things like that. But I found it interesting that Prot Paladin, can have that much armor combined, especially when you look at Prot Warrior having a base of 29,000, completely, totally buff, but Prot Paladin has just that much more baseline, right? That's kind of what they have, which I found to be pretty interesting. Now, let's get on to the leather tanks. So we're going to start off with Bear. So my Bear has a base armor rating of 13,178. And with Blistering Scales, that went up to 16,000. Now, Iron for each stack, for me, adds 9,700 rating. So this is how we kind of stack our armor, but we gain about 3,000 to 4,000 on a fully geared pretty fully geared Evoker. So decently interesting there. Now, for leather tanks, it's actually dodge. So my dodge chance went up from 20.15% to 21.96. Unfortunately, there's no real synergies there with some of our other tanks. Like, we don't get anything for dodging, of course, aside from just being able to dodge the attack, which is nice, but it doesn't give us anything. Like Prot Warrior, if you parry, you can get Best Served Cold. Paladin, if you parry, you can get Grand Crusader, and Blood DK, if you parry, well, you don't have to worry about your health bar dipping that much, which is actually pretty good. So with that, I found Bear, gained a decent amount, but really nothing significant. Like one stack of Iron Fur, to tell you the truth, is more than double what you're going to gain from Blistering Scales. So now Ebon Might does affect Iron Fur, and I was getting some weird numbers, so I didn't really want to say anything there. Not that I wouldn't want to say anything, I was just getting weird numbers, so I don't have a totally comprised of what Ebon Might can do for Iron Fur. It was acting really wonky, so we're just going to put a little asterisk towards that one. No, we're going to end with Monk. Demon Hunter. So my Demon Hunter started with an armor of 11,300. Adding Blistering Scales is 14,700. Immolation Aura adds 20% armor of your art, adds an extra 20% of your armor onto that while active, and Demon Spikes is 10,200 armor. So when we had Ebon Might, Blistering Scales, Immolation Aura, and Demon Spikes, we had a grand total of 29,850 armor, which is actually pretty impressive, because if you just look at the base numbers and you look at what you have fully buffed up, and going in. Now, do note that as well, you know, this had tepid versatility. This was me kind of regularly buffed up for, you know, a Mythic Plus run, which was actually fairly impressive. Now, I had a parry rating of 16.84%, and that never moved, and my dodge rating went up from 13.59% to 15.28%. So we did get a small bump, almost 2% to dodge, which I find very unfortunate because this is a leather thing. Like, leather gets dodge and plate gets parry. Demon Hunter already likes parry. We have a lot of things that increase our parry, right? Demon Spikes adds 15% parry. Critical Strike, it gives us a lot more parry. And I find there would have been more synergies with there if Augmentation somehow increased the parry rating, or if the stats allowed for something like that. But unfortunately, it doesn't. But if we look at Augmentation Evoker and Demon Hunter fully buffing with Ebon Might and Blistering Scales, you can pretty easily get around 30,000 armor. Which is really, really nice, and going to just allow a lot of physical damage mitigation, which to me is kind of one of the weaker points of Vengeance, because you are relying a lot more on that parry, and being able to buff up that armor that significantly is actually pretty good. You're gaining a very good chunk, and you already have a lot of passive magic damage mitigation kind of within your kit, and, you know, what you can do. So I found that to be very interesting and very, very nice, where you do gain a lot as Vengeance having an augment in the party. All right, Brewmaster Monk. Now, Brewmaster Monk, this was actually really interesting, and I like this a lot, because when I played with Augmentation Evoker as a Brewmaster, I immediately felt just unkillable. And there is some reason why. So, my monk started with the lowest armor rating of 4,750. Blistering Scales brought that up to 7,615. And monk doesn't really have many ways to increase the armor, right? We got a couple of defensives that can do it and things like that, but really you're relying a lot more on your active mitigation of stagger to be able to take care of this. So you almost, and I mean almost, doubled your armor, right? Like, that's pretty crazy, right? You start at 4,700 and you get a 3k boost, right? I know it's not quite double, but we're just making this, we're just doing this for show. That's a big armor increase percentage-wise to what you gain for monk, which is pretty huge, but armor doesn't tell the whole tale. Because Ebon Might increases your primary stat, my stagger went from 40.96%. Now, understand, I have 2 non-primary stat trinkets, because I've been very unlucky on Brewmaster. I'm running the Verse File that increases your file duration and gives you primary stat as a buff, about a 30 to 40% uptime. And I'm running a beacon. Now, I want to say unlucky. I still have a beacon, so I'm pretty happy there. But there's no primary stat on those aside from the proc that you get from that. So I am running a little bit low primary stat, so my stagger should be a little bit higher. But my stagger went up to 46.14%. With Ebon Might, that was a 5% stagger increase, which I don't think should be counted lightly. I know it only sounds like 5%, but we have talent options that give us like 2%. Right? Or, you know, a 2-pointer is 4% along with the small haste buff. A 5% just for this one buff is pretty big. On top of that, my dodge rating, because leather tanks get the dodge rating from the primary stat, went from 13% to 15%. So a 2% increase, which is generally what we're seeing across the board for things like that, for monk, demon hunter, and bear, is a 2% increase in that dodge, and about a 1.52% increase for plate tanks on parry. But Dodge synergizes incredibly well with our kit because our tier set is, dodge centric, right? So just getting a base 2% dodge means a whole lot more for a monk than any other spec, because really our tier set, our survivability is based around that dodge. Our mastery is based around that dodge. And getting that extra 2% increase is really small, but does help, right? It is kind of pretty big. When you stop and think about the grand scheme of things, with how quickly you can get, how much more quickly that can bring you to 1% with Elusive Brawler and all that fun stuff. And I found that Monk, I think, actually kind of gets the biggest increase, mainly due to the stagger buff, right? That's 5% increase on stagger is nothing to be scoffed at. Not to mention just how much more armor you get, how much more armor value you get, right? Because we have to start thinking there are armor caps to these things. There's only so much armor that we can have. I mean, I know me on Bear, if I have 6 or 9 stacks of Iron Fur, I'm not feeling a defensive difference, right? You just get so much that it doesn't really matter. But Monk having such a low armor value, being able to just bring that up some, increase the stagger value and the dodge, everything kind of synergizes with one another and is actually pretty crazy. But those are my findings for Augment Evoker and tanking. I just thought this was going to be a fun stat video to put together. What do you guys think? Let me know. I would love to hear your opinions. Have yourselves a good one, everyone. Happy tanking. Bye.